What is going on, all my haunted followers? So this is my experience with Lincoln Park. And if any of you who do not know what Lincoln Park was, it was a amusement park in Dartmouth, Massachusetts that was built in 1894, and I believe it closed down in 1987. Now, there's only one report of a death at the amusement park, and that was of a facility worker who fell from the comet ride. And the comet ride was a roller coaster. Now, to make things clear, and for those who do not know this, you don't have to necessarily have a death at a location to have paranormal activity. And this is what we call in the paranormal world residual energy. And residual energy is basically a combination of different types of emotions at one location. And it's just fulfills that location and it just stays there. And basically it's kind of like playing a video on playback over and over again. And with the residual energy, you can have noises, you can have visual, you can have apparitions, which is not necessarily apparitions, but they're apparitions of residual energy, and you can have even residual smells. So, bringing it all back to that. So this is what a lot of people were experiencing, and this is what the reports were coming from at that time. I don't know if it's still there. I mean, I don't know if the residual energy is still there. With residual energy, it doesn't necessarily go away. It's always there, even if something's built over it. And I believe, again, I think it's condos there now. So, who knows? This happened in 2003, 2004-ish. A friend of mine who lived in Dartmouth, he wanted me to go with him to check out the park. Now, what we did was we went to the police department and we actually got permission from them. We just let them know, hey, we're going to be there for a little bit over the night. And then, we weren't going to cause any trouble. We're basically kind of just taking pictures of the place and kind of just walking around the grounds. So it's 10:30, 11 o'clock, and we get to the park and we park adjacent to the park itself. And then we walk through a field. And I'm trying to picture this in my head, guys. And it's a beautiful night out. Again, it's July, it's warm, we had our t-shirts on. And we walk into the park itself. And the park is still kind of there. The old roller coaster was still there. And some concession stands that were still there. There's a lot of graffiti everywhere. But for the most part, the park is still there. So we're walking through and we're just kind of looking around. And the distant noise of cars passing by is kind of drowning out really for us to hear anything. And we sit down next to a concession stand, which, if I remember correctly, I'm looking right at the roller coaster itself, the Comet. And we sat doing EVP. Now, for me, some investigators do this, some don't. They don't believe that they should be done. But for me, what I'll do is I'll do an EVP session, and then I'll track back a couple minutes later and see if I get responses. This is for me so I can see if the spirit is communicating with me, or maybe it's an intelligent spirit that's communicating with me at that point. And I play it back, and over my talking and my friend talking, I hear what sounds like a roller coaster going up and down on the tracks. So my friend grabs the voice recorder from me, and he's listening to this, and he plays it back over and over again. And we're trying to figure out the sound, whether it was a distant noise of some cars, or maybe it was a train in the background where we captured, but there was no train. And the sound was clear as day as the roller coaster went up and came down, and you could softly make out the screaming of people going up and down the roller coaster. So we go back, we start doing another EVP session, and at this point, we're not necessarily looking for ghosts. We're kind of just trying to pick up some type of sound, some type of ambient sound, residual energy, if you will. And as we're sitting there doing this EVP session, I get the smell of popcorn out of nowhere. And it was very clear smell, almost like someone had just made it in the microwave. And I asked my friend if he had smelled the same thing, and he said no. So I kind of blew that off and just went about our EVP session. We did about 10 minutes of an EVP, of voice recording, went back and played it again, and we were shocked. The EVP not only was picking up the roller coaster noise at this point, but you could faintly make out people talking, and you couldn't make out any words of them, but it was clearly people talking amongst themselves, and groups of people. So at this point, we kind of got what we wanted, and that smell of popcorn came back to me. And at that point, my friend said the same thing. He could smell popcorn. So we started walking. To go under the roller coaster, kind of just go under, because there's another section that we want to check out. And I looked up at the top of the roller coaster, and if you look up from where I was standing, the moon was shining enough that I could see on top of the roller coaster where the comet had stopped. And I saw this shadow, and at first I thought it was a light trick because the cars were passing by. I'm thinking that the cars were reflecting off of the comet itself, reflecting back onto the tracks, creating this shadow. But it was a human-shaped shadow, and this shadow was walking along the tracks, and it came down one of the tracks and went back up, and it was kind of floating. It wasn't walking, it was kind of like hovering, floating along the tracks, if you will, floating down. It came out, and it got to the top of one of the tracks and vanished. So at this point of pointing this out to my friend, he is obviously scared. He didn't think that we were going to capture anything, so he wanted to leave, and he wanted to go back to the car. So I did something that I never normally do. I never do this. I never have done this in my investigations, but this is something I wanted to do. I didn't want to go back to the vehicle. I told him if he was scared enough that he can go back, and I would stay there by myself. Again, something you should never do. It's very dangerous. Anything could happen. So I'm sitting there by myself, and I hear Carnival music. And I'm thinking in my head, I'm like, everything people are saying, I am hearing at this point. I'm hearing Carnival music. And it's a very faint noise. It's almost like somebody was playing off a radio. And I can't believe I can't believe I'm hearing this at this point. And so I kind of started going towards the noise, where this was coming from. And I'm thinking I'm going to walk up on a radio and someone's playing a hoax on me or something. Or he was playing a hoax on me. And the closer I get to the sound, the further it gets, if that makes any sense. And then the sound all of a sudden flipped, and it was behind me. So I turned back around, and I started walking towards the noise. And I stopped for a second because it felt like someone was walking behind me. And I'm thinking that my friend had returned to stay a little bit longer. And I turned around, and there was no one there. And again, I get that sense that someone is directly behind me. And I hear what I can only describe as a male voice. And they said, "Hello." And it was a quick, "Hello." And I flipped back around, and there's no one there, obviously. The sound was right in my ear, so I know that it wasn't someone off in the distance. It was right directly in my ear, and the goosebumps ran up goosebumps ran up my spine. I got a cold chill. And I knew something was still right behind me at that point. Doing this for so many years, you kind of get a sense of things. You kind of grow an extra sense. Now, I'm not saying that I'm a psychic. I'm not saying I'm a medium. I don't talk to spirits. If I talk to spirits, it's going to be through a voice recorder. But I just got a sense that someone was standing behind me. And I kind of started walking towards the exit. Well, wherever we had came from the field. Because at that point I felt kind of unwelcome. Like, it felt like I shouldn't be there. And I look to my left, and again I can see the roller coaster, the tracks. And I see a human figure standing at the very top, looking down on me. And I'm looking up at this thing, and I have a flashlight. It's not a very good flashlight. It's bright enough that I could shine up on the tracks. And as soon as I do, this shadow disappears. So I'm thinking, okay, this is a light trick. But it was definitely in the shape of a human form, and what I could only assume at the point was an apparition. So I'm standing there, and I felt the feeling of someone come up behind me again. And this time I don't turn around. I kind of just pause for a second, and I hear hello again. And I'm kind of sitting there hoping and praying that it's my friend. And I turn around, and there's nothing there. At this point, I'm kind of not only feeling unwelcomed, but kind of unsafe at this point. I'm alone. So I started walking towards the exit, or where the field was that we get to the car. And I just remember smelling the popcorn smell again. And all of a sudden, it's just like a wave of sound came over me. And it sounded like just groups of people talking and like laughing and having fun. And I get this sense of like the temperature change around me. It was almost like it was went from being nighttime to daytime, and I couldn't see anything, but it was like I was in a different place at that point. I could hear the groups of people, I could hear the roller coaster, I could smell the popcorn, and all of a sudden I snapped to, and I can't describe this feeling of just coming to. And I walk through the field back to the car, and I get in the car, and of course my friend's asking me, what happened, and I'm trying to just gather my thoughts at that point of what exactly happened. And obviously he's still nervous and he's still scared, and I just can't give him an answer, because it was almost like I went back in time for a few minutes, and I was in a different place, and I was there at, Lincoln Park, back when it was still up and running, and there was people all around me, and it just felt like I was in a different place. So guys, I hope that you liked my story. I know it was kind of short, but it's hard to get so much detail on something that happened so quickly, yet felt like 10 minutes had passed through this whole situation, when in reality it's 4 hours. I don't know what happened to me within that 4 hours. There's so many different stories of this happening to people where they're kind of just frozen in time, basically, and 4 or 5 hours pass, and next thing you know, they snap back to it. I can definitely say that, although it may not be haunted, I'm not going to say it's not haunted. Well, was haunted, if you will. Did I experience a full body apparition? Was a spirit trying to communicate with me? Maybe that worker was trying to communicate with me, because down the line, that the whole place was going to get torn down, and it was already had been talked about it when I was going back and forth. And they were already talking about knocking the whole place down, getting rid of the whole thing. So I hope you guys like my story. This is my Lincoln Park story, and if you guys ever had your own experience at this place, please let me know. I'd love to hear your stories about this, and I want to know if the location is still there. Is there anything left of the Dartmouth? I know that some pieces were brought over to, I believe, Battleship Cove in Fall River, but where the other pieces went, I'm not sure. Happy huntings, guys.